On the 26th of May 2013, a teenage girl leaves her home in Shropshire to meet a friend. She never makes it home.
She's 17 years old, she's a child. You've then got to look at, this is out of character for her.
And what was she wearing, who was she with? So detail as much description as possible of what was known of Georgia the last time she was seen.
Her terrified friends and family searched the area.
Off the main road running between Ruthin and Wrexham is through the sort of Snowdonian mountain area, valleys, and it's remote, but it's very popular for campers and for hikers.
This is an area where bad things don't happen to good people.
Police quickly hone in on the suspect.
He planned it, he lured Georgia in, and he knew what he was going to do to try to get away with it.
Telford is a town in Shropshire, located in the West Midlands of England. It's surrounded by scenic countryside, charming architecture, and many historic sites, including the Iron Bridge Gorge.
Shropshire is a county in the United Kingdom. The main city centre of it is Telford, but there are lots of picturesque, beautiful towns in and around the area. It's got beautiful rolling countryside, huge historic sites. It's got a big culture of walking, cycling, outdoor pursuits.
It's stuck in the corridor between the M6 going from Birmingham to Manchester and the Welsh border. So even though it's in the centre of the British Isles, it is a fairly remote but beautiful country area. People in Shropshire that are full of local people who love Shropshire and never leave, plus other people who moved out from the Midlands, the Birminghams and the Wolverhamptons, just a few miles out into the countryside, partly in retirement or just to seek a different quality of life. It's quite a rich tapestry and a range of people who live in that part of the world.
It's a lovely area. Low crime, nothing special about criminality there. Gets lots of visitors. Yeah, it's a lovely place to live, work and visit.
Not only is this a beautiful place to raise a family, it's also a fabulous place to grow up and be a kid. And one of those towns is Wellington. Wellington's got these very picturesque black and white buildings for historic value. It's got a big black and white picturesque clock in the town centre.
Sunday the 26th of May 2013 starts out as a typical summer's day for 17-year-old Georgia Williams.
Georgia was from the Shropshire area. She was born 7th of September 1995. According to friends and family, Georgia was a caring and full of life girl.
Georgia was a very smart young lady, full of life, lots of friends, well liked. She was very close to her family, and she lived with her father Stephen at the time, who himself actually was a police officer.
She had a difficult start in life at school. There was an element of bullying there, and that really moulded her view of life and the future. She was determined that on her watch, nobody would be bullied. So there was an inclusive feel about her work. She was a mentor, she was a student counsellor, she was head girl at a school, and she was in the RAF cadets. She wanted to join the RAF and to work as a military paramedic. She was sort of devoting to helping people and devoted to serving her country.
She did sports, she was keen to be in the outdoors, and as soon as she was old enough that she got a job working at the local petrol station.
On the 26th of May 2013, Georgia is at a family barbecue.
On that fateful day, Georgia was just doing normal things that she would ordinarily do. She was at a family barbecue and she told her family that she was going on to meet her friends.
It's a lovely day. She leaves to go and do this early evening photo shoot at this address. Doesn't think she's going to be there very long, and they can expect her home, you know, early later on that evening.
Georgia isn't seen or heard from again for several hours. This is quite unusual for Georgia. It would appear that she keeps in regular contact with her mum and would always say where she was and what she was up to, so they felt it was really out of character that she hadn't been in contact with them.
Her mother did receive a text from Georgia's phone saying, on my way, run into some friends, I'll be having a chat with them, hanging out with them for tonight, don't worry about me. And she finished off with her trademark 3 X's. There was nothing at this stage for Georgia's parents to worry about.
Upon receiving this text, they're assured that their daughter's absolutely fine. She's just gone out and done what any teenager would do in a small town. She's hanging out with her friends. She'll be back at some point later in the evening, possibly after they've gone to bed. But they know most of her friends. They certainly know the small town, and they don't have any concern. They go to bed, and as far as they're concerned, everything is fine.
The next morning, Georgia's mum woke up and found that Georgia hadn't come home. So she was starting to get a little bit worried, texted Georgia, and a few hours later she got a text back. The text she received back said that she'd stayed over at her friend's, not to worry, and also that her battery was about to die on her phone.
And what's really important is, in an investigation, is patterns. And parents know, generally, the patterns of their children almost meticulously. They know them off by heart. So the fact that Georgia hadn't replied, the fact that Georgia said she'd stayed at her friends, this was all really unusual. This was not behaviour that Georgia would be involved in. And to let her phone battery get so low that it was about to run out really, really became an issue for Lynette. And she got increasingly concerned because this was really out of character for Georgia.
It is now the 28th of May, 2 days since Georgia's parents last saw their daughter.
What Lynette also knew was that on that day, Georgia had a lot of plans. She was supposed to be going to a music festival. She was supposed to have a driving lesson. And again, not the type of thing that she would just decide to abandon and not turn up for. So the whole of that day passes. Mum and Dad are getting more and more concerned. So at this point, they start phoning round all Georgia's friends, seeing whether they've heard from her, whether she's with them. That's all negative, so they become more and more concerned for her well-being.
Georgia's boyfriend, Matt, put out an alert on Facebook. Parents were phoning round everywhere. Georgia's mother rang Georgia's phone direct, and it went straight to voicemail. This could not continue. Police had to be summoned, and so the parents went straight to the police to report Georgia missing.
A report is made either by phone or in person, where in this case the parents would tell police that they're concerned about their daughter, why it's out of character, which is the key thing, because depending on age is where police would assess in terms of vulnerability and urgency and danger. So all of that would be explained to the police, taken into account, added to the, this is completely out of character. So, what did she look like when she was last seen? What was she wearing? Who was she with? So detailed with as much description as possible of what was known of Georgia the last time she was seen.
Georgia's parents tell police that 2 days prior, their daughter said she was going to meet a friend named Jamie for a photo shoot.
Georgia's first job was working in a petrol station. This is where she met Jamie Reynolds. He also worked in a petrol station.
The first thing that the parents told the police was the last person that Georgia was due to see was Jamie. The police put that name straight into the police computer for a check, and red flags were flung up immediately.
It's now 2 days since Georgia Williams disappeared, and investigators are concerned that she's come to harm at the hands of Jamie Reynolds. They need to find out everything they can about this troubled 23-year-old. On May 28, 2013, the parents of 17-year-old Georgia Williams report her missing in Telford, Shropshire. They tell police she was last seen 2 days earlier heading to a photo shoot with work colleague Jamie Reynolds, and haven't heard from her since.
Georgia's parents actually thought that Jamie was a polite and very friendly lad. They knew that he lived just down the road from them in a very similar house and had nice parents. There was nothing to raise any sort of alarm about this man that their daughter knew. He knew her sister, her eldest sister, Scarlett, because they had been at school together. Even though there was a 5-year age gap, Jamie immediately had his eyes on her. Jamie fancied Georgia. Georgia didn't fancy Jamie, but she was determined that he shouldn't be excluded, and so they remained friends.
According to George's family, they'd seen Jamie a couple of times in the workplace. He was always polite and friendly, but he was no more than just a work colleague to Georgia.
Georgia really encouraging people to fulfil their dreams. That was part of her makeup. And Jamie Reynolds had indicated that he wanted to pursue a career in photography, and she encouraged him to do that. Due to Georgia encouraging him to pursue his dreams and following his liking for photography, he offered Georgia opportunities to help him by becoming involved in some of his photo shoots. She's a polite young lady, didn't want to say no, and went along with that just to help him out.
Jamie's parents are away on holiday in Italy, and he announces that he's finally got the space to do this photo shoot, and would Georgia come round and be part of this photo shoot, and she agrees to. He asks her to be a model in this photo shoot. He assures her that all he needs is her to stand there, and he's going to create a sort of backdrop, and it's going to be this creative process where she's going to look like she's floating as part of a wider image, and he's going to do some manipulation of it in post-production, and she's to come round to the house. It's all above board, not to worry, and on this day in May, she's asked to attend and be his model.
What is found out about Jamie Reynolds is that he has got a previous in 2008 whereby he lured a 16-year-old girl on the pretense of taking part in a project, and that he tried to strangle that girl. So this would raise alarm bells, because this is a very similar circumstance to what Georgia is being told in terms of, will you come and model for me as part of my portfolio? Jamie Reynolds was given a warning for his behaviour in 2008. In this case, the youth offending team were involved, and also some mental health services. The youth offending team's role, obviously, is for rehabilitation and to prevent any further involvement in crime or criminality. So it would be their role. They would have structured visits and times where they would engage with the person. The person, probably on the back of some sort of order, would have to comply with certain things to do with the youth offending team, and if they don't comply, then the youth offending team would report that back to the other various interested parties.
In 2011, there's a further incident involving Jamie and a young girl where she's rejected his advances, and as a result he's rammed her vehicle. That also was reported to the police.
This is someone that has severe and demonstrated problems with women, and he's somebody that can't control his temper, and he cannot handle rejection.
The previous police reports on Jamie Reynolds paint a picture of a young man with disturbing interests.
Every piece of information that is presented to the police is increasingly disturbing and provokes a great deal of alarm. Not only are they looking for their colleague's daughter from the same police force, but every single piece of information that comes out about Reynolds is disturbing and alarming. This is somebody who has used violence against young girls before. This is somebody that has designs on young women and has shown capable of using force. One of the features of this case is not only had Reynolds been apprehended by the police on more than one occasion for violent attacks towards young women, but his own parents were so alarmed by pornography, an expansive collection of pornography that they'd found on his personal computer, that they too had gone to the police. This wasn't the online exploration of a teenage boy who's interested in the opposite sex. This was over 16,000 pornographic files, many of which were of an extremely violent nature.
Pornography can have a huge influence on young people and their understanding of what is normal or healthy sex. In many of the cases that I've been involved in, pornography, and particularly violent pornography, has played a role. For some people, violent pornography isn't enough to satisfy what they see as a sexual desire and a sexual need. For some people, they act that out in the real world. And in many cases, if you think about violence, they might not be able to find a consenting partner to do that with them, and they choose to offend in a violent way.
Jamie's particular sexual thrill was from strangulation and particularly noose-connected hanging, and followed by having sex with a dead body. All these are serious, serious issues of a very warped mind and a serious danger to women. He clearly had a vast access to vast amounts of this sexual sadism on the internet, and what was to stop him then working his own fantasies in his mind and then trying to enact them? This man needed help, and help urgently, otherwise goodness knows what was going to happen, but nothing was done.
What I'm seeing nowadays is younger and younger people, boys, are getting access to violent pornography, and it's really affecting what they see as normal and affecting their behaviour within sexual relationships later on.
This was an individual who'd written multiple personal accounts of how he wanted to attack individual girls he knew in his own personal life. This was somebody who'd not only attacked young women before, who was a proactive danger to young women, who the police knew about, but also his own parents, so concerned with their son and what he might do and the impact that pornography was having on his life, they too had gone to police.
The police have a variety of orders that they can apply to the court to be put in place to help mitigate and reduce risk. Importantly, part of the support offered to people with unhealthy sexual thoughts and unhealthy sexual behaviours can be psychological intervention to explore that and to look at what those unhealthy thoughts are and to try and support them in developing a healthier sexual interest. But unfortunately, for some people, a minority of people, they do go on to commit very serious offences.
So the likely next steps would be to do some research on Jamie Reynolds, trying to ascertain where he would be, what do they know about him, where to start their lines of inquiry. They would look to contact him, visit him, whichever was the most appropriate, to see whether Georgia was still with him when he saw her last, or indeed if there was any concerns around him.
Police visit Jamie's family home.
So initially they would have done a search just to ascertain whether Georgia was there. Once they realised that he wasn't there, and this would raise their concerns that they need to find him and also to find Georgia.
At this point in time, obviously, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that suggests that Jamie is of concern to young women. There's obviously a suggestion that he has some sexual fantasies that are on the very extreme end. Also suggests that he doesn't like being scorned and that he might have some slight obsessive behaviour. So he would become the main focus of an investigation to try and understand, where is he? When was he last seen? Is he where he should be? And a very keen desire to speak to him to see when did he see Georgia last and where did she go once she left his address.
West Mercia police are now urgently trying to locate Jamie Reynolds to ask him about Georgia's whereabouts.
All the police are concerned with is finding Georgia. The obvious suspect is Jamie, so they use technology of CCTV and number plate recognition to try and track this prime suspect down.
CCTV managed to track and trace Jamie miles and miles away up in Glasgow. He's in a van, and what's also seen is that he's getting changed outside of the van, which is all quite strange, really. Why is he so far away? Why is he getting changed on the pavement outside of his van?
Though Reynolds has been located, there is no sign of Georgia.
The Police Scotland operate under different legislation. They under Scottish law, and we work the English legislation, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. So you contact the Scottish Police, you tell them what the circumstances of the investigation that you're undertaking are, and you ask them to locate whoever your subject is, in this case Jamie Reynolds. And once that they've done that, they can make the arrest on your behalf.
Jamie is spoken to and he denies any knowledge of Georgia or where she is, so the decision then is made to bring him back to Telford so he can be formally spoken to in relation to the disappearance of Georgia.
So he would have been arrested at the time for kidnap, and then it's a case of officers from West Mercia Police going up to Police Scotland and transferring him back to that area. He was initially interviewed around the safety and the welfare of Georgia because she wasn't found with him, and he denied any knowledge of where she was.
Part of the interviews of Jamie, of course, the key question is, where is Georgia? At this point, it's still not known where Georgia is. Jamie refuses to give over that information in interview, and that, feels like he's playing games with the officers who are interviewing him.
He wouldn't reveal the whereabouts of Georgia, almost like trying to be in control, wanting to call the shots and dictate what was happening.
Investigators believe Georgia Williams has come to harm at the hands of Jamie Reynolds, but needs solid evidence to prove it. West Mercia Police are investigating the disappearance of 17-year-old Georgia Williams from Telford, who vanished on May 26, 2013, after telling her parents she was doing a photo shoot with Jamie Reynolds. Known to police for a previous attempted strangulation, Reynolds is now in custody on suspicion of kidnapping, and police plan to search his home.
When police search a property, which you're entitled to do when someone's in custody, you can do it under Section 18 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, and there are other parts of the Act that you can utilise, or you could get a warrant. You're led by a police search advisor, what we call pulsers, with search officers, and often they will take digital inquiry officers along on that search. So if something needs to be recovered, it can be done so safely, so there is minimal loss of evidence and protects the integrity of the investigation. So they will have gone with a search plan. They will have known they were looking for clothing, anything that might be bloodstained, but they will also be looking for telephones, laptops, tablets, those kind of things, so they could recover them and then do the forensic searching on those items.
The SIO would write their search strategy, that include in that search strategy anything they thought was relevant. So that might be phones, SIM cards, diaries, clothing, imagery, and the strategy would be written all around that. They would brief a search team who are trained in search, and those teams, room by room, would literally turn over every little piece, they'd open every drawer, they'd look under every bed, on top of every wardrobe in the loft space, and literally go through methodically with a fine-tooth comb. Those teams would be wearing gloves, so everything would be forensically secure, and they would be forensically seized, packaged, and then able to send off for forensic analysis. If it was something like a phone, they would be seized and taken to the digital media investigators, and again the relevant work done on those phones to the information that's held within those phones, or a camera, or anything that's capable, computers, anything that's capable of holding data.
During the search, they recovered a number of items, and one was a SIM card that, when examined, it looked as though someone had tried to delete the contents, but they hadn't done a very good job. The evidence was then recovered by the specialists, and when they looked at it, there was in excess of 16,000 images of a macabre sexual nature, sadism, bondage, very unusual contents. And the further they looked, they found images of Georgia on the same SIM card that really presented a timeline of events for the investigation as to what had happened.
It starts with Georgia being completely trusting and helping and saying, would you like me to do this? Would you like to do that? She was noticeably not wearing the clothes that she had left the barbecue with. Clearly, Jamie had brought clothes that she should wear. She was posing on a little box with a noose which had been created across the gap leading, the staircase leading to the upper loft bedroom, with a rowing boat oar struck across it and secured with the banisters, and a noose hanging down. There was this trusting girl without a single thought that what was going to happen. Clearly, Jamie had stepped forward, pushed her backwards, and kicked the box from under her knees.
Everyone's worst fears are confirmed by the contents of the phone.
The abuse was carried out while she was dead, in rooms throughout the house, including his parents' marital bed.
For some people who are seeking sexual satisfaction from any unhealthy sexual interest, the difficulty can be is that it becomes no longer enough. They seek more. Either a simulated image of what they're looking for, in this case violence, isn't exciting enough and they're stepping into the real world, or it is very exciting but they want to achieve a similar hit, so to speak, a similar excitement. Now that doesn't mean that it's out of that person's control. Offending of any kind is a decision, but strong urges and a strong desire for sex and sexual gratification can be a strong motivator for some offenders.
You actually wonder what kind of awful individual you're dealing with as a police officer and leading that kind of investigation. It makes you think, makes you question humanity, but you just remain professional throughout. There's a job to do, but you feel for the poor soul, Georgia in this case, the pain and suffering she'll have gone through.
This shows a man who for years and years has nursed and nurtured his inner cravings for serious sexual sadism.
When officers have searched the home address, they've also found some stories that he's written. Within those stories, they included stories about Georgia and about what he wanted to do with her, they including the strangulation and then other incidents that he was going to do. Those to the officers would show that there's premeditation, that this wasn't just a random sudden act of anger or violence. This was premeditated, fully planned that he was going to do this. In fact, been planning for months that this was going to take place. This just shows the true shocking nature of what took place. At that stage, the truth is that they now know they're dealing with a murder investigation.
Police now need to locate Georgia's body.
You've got a starting point and you've got an end point in Glasgow, and you look at the main arterial routes, you use ANPR inquiries, you look at the movement of the telephone and follow that route, and that will take you that will demonstrate and show you the journey that he took, and that's one of the main lines of inquiry, to find out exactly where they went. And if there are any stops on that route, you would look at those locations and do some research on the layout, the geography, etc. Are there any CCTV opportunities? Are there any media opportunities that you might pursue?
We know obviously he's got a van in Scotland, so tracking that van on CCTV, ANPR, using cell site analysis of his phone, trying to work out, where did he go to next, and along that way building that picture of his journey or any journey, trying to work out, where does he go before he gets to Scotland. And the key things there will be CCTV, ANPR, phone work, phone analysis, all to help build that picture.
In this case, the officers realised that there was a gap of several hours from between when he left the home address and when he arrived in Scotland, and it was trying to fill the details around that. One option to do that is to go to the public to see if they can help, and that's what took place in this scenario. There was an appeal to the public via the press to show an image of the van and the registration of the van, to appeal for people to come forward as witnesses to try and help fill those gaps, which would then help find where Georgia is. From the inquiries the officers did, they managed to recover some CCTV. One of those bits of footage showed him filling up his van, which was his stepfather's van, with petrol. The shocking part of that is at the time that was taking place, we know that Georgia would have been in the back of that van at that time, and he's there acting all casual while he fills the vehicle up.
He's next spotted in a cinema in Wrexham, which is 60 miles away, where he'd clearly driven up there, and he's at a cinema and he's watching Fast and Furious, which is a film that he obviously loved, and it's a film that he wanted Georgia to see with him. The connection again is clear and obvious in what is happening in Jamie Reynolds' mind.
So what's surprising with the footage from the cinema is just how casual he is, having committed a murder the day before. That in itself is unusual behaviour and shocking behaviour.
Police make an appeal to the public for assistance in locating Georgia's remains.
So when you sort of come to a bit of a dead end and you need the public on your side, you use your media marketing department within whichever force you're in, and you strike up a media appeal, and you can do that through a lot of the social media platforms, and you can do it through the main press outlets. They did have CCTV footage of the van. They did have a registration number of the van. They'd have a rough area of where he'd been, so they knew he'd stopped in Wrexham. So you go to the public via the media and ask, does anyone have any recollection of this particular vehicle?
Press appeal goes out at this point. Now the police are aware of the van that he was in, and quite a few people come forward, and the sightings of him at 5 o'clock in Wrexham and 10:30 in Cheshire. So he is seen by quite a few people.
But there was a 5-hour gap between the Wrexham film and the Cheshire sighting. What had happened in that period? That is what the police wanted to know, if they were ever going to find Georgia's body. So they appealed to the public. Does anybody remember seeing this distinctive white van that Jamie was driving, or could help with her in any way at all? And they came up trumps. And members of the public remembered helping a young man answering Jamie's description, with a white van who got stuck in mud on the road between Ruthin and Wrexham. And here police had a huge breakthrough.
When you get a location that there's been a period of time and there's been a problem for the witnesses to become involved and say they helped him, and it's a rural area, it's a wooded area to the side, that's a great start for where you're going to put your search effort. That particular route, it was a mountain pass between Ruthin in North Wales and Wrexham. It's largely wooded and steep valley sides for a lot of the way. But once they located the area that had been given assistance by members of the public, that was where they started with the search efforts. The police went, they will have used the search officers, and they found Georgia's body not too far away from the side of the road. There wasn't a real concerted effort to conceal her body, and they found, as I say, very near to the location where members of the public had helped him off, get back onto the road. And it must have been an awful experience for the officers, because you want people to come back alive.
Where the body was found was on just off a mountain track road, really. It's mountainous, it's very remote. There's a valley that was running through nearby with a stream. So the priority then, once the body is found, is to sort of preserve the area around that to make sure that nothing is lost forensically. That would be done first. And again, a crime scene coordinator would be allocated to that location to make sure all possible evidence can be gathered. The main challenge to the location where Georgia was found is that it's open to the elements. It's in a wooded area, so it's open to other animals, that sort of things. So it's really important to once she's been found, is to make sure that area is cordoned off and secure, and for it to be dealt with expeditiously and as quick as we can.
He hadn't even bothered really to dig any sort of makeshift grave. He just sort of discarded it. He just dumped it in the most obscene fashion. This now being 3 or 4 days later, nature had taken its course, and the only way her body could be identified was through dental records.
As a journalist tasked with writing stories and summing up the horror in some of these cases, you reach for words like monster, evil, wicked, but in this case those words truly apply. There isn't any other word other than monster. There isn't any other word other than evil. There's a complete absence of empathy and humanity in this individual, both in the way he's behaved to women previously and in the way he's tricked a wonderful young girl and snatched her life away in the most deplorable way for nothing other than to satisfy a personal design he had.
On the 31st of May 2013, 5 days after the disappearance of 17-year-old Georgia Williams, Jamie Reynolds is formally charged with her murder. The 23-year-old maintains his innocence, and preparations for the trial are now underway. On the 1st of June 2013, 23-year-old Jamie Reynolds appears at the Telford Magistrates Court, charged with the murder of 17-year-old Georgia Williams, whose body was discovered the day previous in remote woodland near Ruthin in North Wales. Reynolds maintains he is innocent.
Jamie Reynolds embarked on a game of cat and mouse with the police. He'd obviously worked out in his mind that at some stage he was going to be arrested, and that he had in his mind his defence. So to start off with, he denied any connection to Georgia and said that she'd left his house perfectly alive and well. When confronted with various stages of the evidence that they have found, he suddenly claimed to have amnesia, that he'd forgot, he had no knowledge of this, it was all something that he couldn't possibly help them with. Later on, he had flashbacks of memories about carrying her body. But ultimately, he showed no remorse whatsoever and no inclination to help the police, let alone stop the grieving or help the grieving parents of Georgia Williams.
The police are convinced that Reynolds is responsible. He's the last person to see her alive. He's located at this area in these woods near Wrexham. His van's been spotted there, he's been spotted there, and now, tragically, they've located Georgia in these woods too. They charge Reynolds, and police, having made so many mistakes around Reynolds' life previously, are desperate to get the case solved and get a conviction.
Given the fact that they got all the evidence from the SIM card and the photographic evidence, and now they've got George's body and the witness evidence from people helping him get back on the road, there's sufficient evidence to go to the Crown Prosecution Service and ask for authority for charges.
Once Jamie's charged, that's only just the beginning of the investigation. Afterwards, there's a lot of work that has to go in to be able to present the case at court, and that is to give a fuller picture of what's took place, an understanding of the movements before, during and afterwards, to put together a picture around the forensic evidence. There's a lot of hours spent gathering CCTV, trying to identify witnesses, to understand any of the data that's in the ANPR. Those items that would have been seized from the home address, all of those would have to be examined to understand exactly what's been talked about. Any photographs that initially been found, is to make sure we've got all those in an evidential format. It's to be able to explain to a jury exactly what Jamie did to ensure that he's found guilty at court.
Crucial evidence there that's found on that camera that very clearly shows exactly what happened, coupled with his diaries and the intention that he had formed and the stories that he'd written around what was going to happen, following then his path post the murder of Georgia, where he goes to, what routes he travels, how he goes about disposing of her body, how he's calm, making sure there's a real clear picture of that actual evidence.
There was 40 stories written almost as if film scripts by Jamie, naming people, girls he knew, including one entitled Georgia Williams' Surprise.
This really suggests someone who's preoccupied with violent sexual fantasies, and I'd be really concerned about needing to act to help make sure that this person didn't progress any further if this were found early on. Reynolds had actually made plans to meet 2 other young women in the days after the murder. Who knows what would have happened had that occurred?
The evidence is absolutely overwhelming. There is absolutely no way in my mind that a jury would ever find Jamie Reynolds not guilty of murder, because it's there in black and white, sadly, what he did.
First court appearance that Jamie Reynolds made was notable in the way that he could clearly be seen before entering court to face the charges, laughing and joking. And yet the moment he was brought into court and suddenly the spotlight was on him, suddenly he went all meek and childlike. This was clearly something again that he had planned in his mind to try and portray himself almost as a victim, that I'm just a weak man and couldn't possibly kill anybody.
Now, what's interesting about that is that it's been suggested that perhaps what was in the courtroom was fake. Somebody was scared and looking afraid and anxious. But actually it could have been one or the other. It could have been that the joking around is a persona, something he puts on to act confident in front of others, when actually underneath that is someone anxious who might offend to overcompensate for their anxiety as well as sexual motivation. Or it might be the other way around, that he was putting on that front in court to affect the sentence that the judge would give him.
All the way through this, from the moment he was arrested, including his appearances in court, Jamie Reynolds has given the impression that he had planned this in his mind and that he's acting out possibly another one of his fantasies about how he was going to convince the police of his innocence. It was a pathetic attempt which racked up the pressure and the grief on George's parents.
Initially, he pleaded not guilty at the magistrate's court, but when he went to the Crown Court, he pleaded guilty. This isn't unusual. Often there won't be a plea at the magistrate's court. They'll send it straight to the Crown Court. But it's not unusual for people to plead guilty at the first opportunity, especially when there's such an amount of overwhelming and damning evidence against an individual.
Normally, in a case such as this, prior to any sentencing, a pre-sentence report is required by the judge, and that is generally done by a psychiatrist who will give their view on this person. And in the case of Jamie, that psychiatrist said it was in their view that had he not been caught, he would have gone on to harm more women. Jamie did in fact receive a whole life term, which is the most you can get, no discount given, reduced off that. And at the time, he was one of the youngest people in the UK to receive that sentence.
The most extreme tariff is whole of life. That means that there is no way that that offender is ever going to come out from prison. In this case, because of the concerns that Jamie has to the public should he ever be released, it's the nature of the build-up of what we know about his offending. It's when the letters and the stories that he'd written were recovered to show what took place. He clearly has no regard for female young victims that he befriends. He would be a danger to others. In this case, it was clear that he wasn't just targeting Georgia, he was looking that potentially other victims could have taken place. We know that there was a girl that went there a month before. We know he'd got plans to meet up with girls afterwards that he cancelled, having killed Georgia. He would be a risk if ever released. The judge has given a whole of life tariff to protect the public and to show the severity of the crime that he's committed.
Mr. Justice Wilkie tells the court that Reynolds showed the potential to become a serial killer and sentences him to life in prison. Reynolds appeals the decision, but his appeal is rejected.
The police in this investigation worked tirelessly long hours to bring about this conviction. Absolutely vital at the beginning to build that picture, to understand who that offender is, and once you know who that is, to bring that person into custody as quickly as possible to prevent any other possibility of any offending. The officers involved in this will have worked long hours to do that, and then to make sure that the trial is successful. The reason he pleaded guilty at the first day of the trial is because of all the hard work that was put in to make sure that all the evidence was there, that it was all gathered correctly, it was detailed sufficiently for them. He knows that there's no other option for him to say, I'm guilty of this crime.
Reynolds was at the time the youngest person ever to receive a whole life tariff, and even now there are less than 100 prisoners in England and Wales serving a whole life sentence. It appears in this case a whole life sentence was imposed because of the meticulous planning and deliberate motivation to target a young woman for sexual violence. The judge clearly looked upon that unfavourably, and he gave a whole life order to reflect the seriousness of what he'd done.
Despite the conviction, the loss of Georgia Williams is still felt by her family, friends, and local community.
Whatever sentence is given, and in this case, a full life sentence, it's never enough, is it? It doesn't bring back their child. Whilst there might be a little sense of, well, at least he's behind bars for 30 years, that protects any other women, in this case, from him. The fact that their child is dead and will never, she was young and bright, never had that life ahead of her. I would imagine it actually brings them little comfort in terms of moving forward.
When you've never met somebody and not met their family, you see the impact that that individual had on their community and their friends by the reaction when their life ends. And in this case, you see the huge outpouring of grief, but also a celebration of her short life. In 17 years, it was clear that she'd had a big impact on anyone that she met and her community. They let go thousands and thousands of lanterns in a show of their love for a vigil. There was a garden and a bench that the community paid for, and I know that her family put together a charity in George's name to help young people pursue their goals and their dreams, which was something that she was very driven by, but also something that horribly she never got to pursue.
Georgia was very much a part of that community where she lived, and her death touched lots and lots of people. There were minutes of silence held for her loss. There was a collection for a memorial bench for Georgia, and she's a huge loss to her family and to the wider community.